Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos I'm doing about enemies in video games, and it's part of a larger suite of videos about game design. And in this one, I just want to talk about some basic concepts when it comes to enemies. It's a bit of a random scatter, but also it's mostly stating the obvious. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is multiplicity. Actually, sometimes there are some people who find it hard to get their head around this aspect of enemies. But anybody who's a programmer, certainly a programmer of object-oriented languages, will have no problem with this concept at all. And it's the idea of instancing. I'm going to use an example, which is from Serious Sam. I've got a couple of blurry pictures here. Here's a thing called a clear, and here's a picture of lots of clears. So the point is that for this is that when you create the information about an enemy in a game, then often the situation is that you create the information for one enemy, and this is like a blueprint for what that enemy looks like. And then in the actual game, you create multiple copies of the same enemy. And you've seen this in games that there's multiple things, but the way the programming for this works is that you use one class, as it's called, and then you create several instances of it. What you don't need to do as a designer is to create each individual instance and the information for it, because the program does that for you. And even within that, it's possible to have variations. So you could have, say, their health rating is randomly chosen, say between 8 and 10, or between 500 and 750. And that's still possible within the process of using a template and instancing it. So when you're creating information about your enemies for your game, it's worth remembering that you do have this the ability to do instancing. Not all enemies in games are instanced, so they tend to be called singletons if they're a single instance. You still need to create the information about them, but actually, basically, the mechanism is the same in the program, is that you create the information about the enemy, but you only ever actually create one instance of it. And the most obvious one of that is the boss. And yeah, here's a picture of a boss. Yeah, you tend not to have multiple instances of bosses. And the other one is, which some games used, is the concept of a named, or something that isn't a boss, maybe is slightly tougher than an instanced enemy, and has some particular characteristics of its own. And you might not be able to quite see it, but this is old Sooty from World of Warcraft. So World of Warcraft has named enemies as well as generic enemies, and the names for the generic enemies are the name of the type of the enemy. Okay, so we're going to move on. The next thing I want to talk about is location for enemies. So there are, broadly speaking, two categories or two ways of approaching the location of enemies. I'm assuming that you've got some kind of world, otherwise maybe you haven't got any kind of game, and that your enemies will be placed within this world or will appear within this world. So the first category, or the first way of doing it, is the designed way, which is to be specific. You put your enemies in specific places, or they may be patrolling or wandering, but you've created a place where they start, and they may be fixed in place, or they may be able to move around from there. And the other option really is spawning and a chance for them to spawn. So Minecraft has no specifics about where enemies are. I'm guessing that most people watching this have played Minecraft or are aware of it. Most of the enemies spawn in the dark, which is why nighttime is a dangerous time in Minecraft. Um, and uh, yeah, so that means you don't have to design where they go, but you need to design policies for them and how they're going to spawn and what their chances of spawning and how that happens. For enemies that are based at a location, there is a question about whether they will respawn, and this depends on the type of game that you've got. So, in some games, when an enemy has been killed or dealt with, however that is, and they disappear after a certain amount of time, and there might be again some randomness within that, then they respawn at the location that we're at, and the player gets another chance of having a go at them. And in some games, you want it to be so that once you've got rid of an enemy, you're basically clearing out the space, and so they don't respawn. So it depends on the nature of other parts of gameplay. Um, but just as we're talking about location, I thought it was worth talking about the respawn aspect. Right. Um, Finally, what I'm going to do is a quick look at some types of enemy. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, and it's very much, as I said at the head, stating the obvious, but a quick flick through um, some broad categories which I think cover most types of enemies that I've come across in most games. So here we go. Human. There's obviously a lot of scope in games for fighting other humans. Humanoid, which are things with two legs and two arms, but aren't exactly human. So elves and dwarves and things. This is a Khajiit from Skyrim. Animals, and Lara Croft is well known for her ability to decimate the wildlife population of places that she goes. Aliens. Aliens are a great scope of um, inventiveness for games if you've got the right sort of setting. Fantasy, and that covers a whole load of stuff, of course. So including some of the humanoid races, but also dragons are a big favourite. But there's obviously lots of other fantastical creatures that can be created. Mechanoids, so large mechanical things. Of course, constructs. So this is a golem, uh, but this, I guess, if you're going to get technical, it includes things like jellies, which are a weird kind of enemy. I'm not sure what a beholder counts as if you come across those. Animated objects. So this is a slight cheat because this is a chest that actually isn't a chest. Uh, but objects like in my head, I keep going back to the snapping book in Lego Harry Potter, which is at the start of book three, if I remember right. But this is the concept of taking something that's an everyday object and bringing it to life and making it aggressive. So you might face a grumpy table or something like that. Spirits and ghosts, the the spiritual realm, all sorts of scope for things there. Plants, sometimes they can move. They're usually animated if they're going to attack, but sometimes they can change location, is what I mean by move. And sometimes they can't. Sometimes they're fixed in place. Elementals, that covers quite a wide scope of all sorts of things which are kind of conceptually some kind of intelligent being that's based on some kind of element. It could be classic air, fire, water, earth elements, but there's all sorts of scope for elements. Um, Gods and demons and other religious things, and I guess the split between these and the ghosts is maybe a little arbitrary at times. between the spiritual stuff and the religious stuff. Zombies, special shout out for zombies, the favourite enemy at the moment of all sorts of books, games, films, etc. And my theory is that the reason is that nobody feels sympathy for a zombie. If you're fighting humans, you've got to choose who the enemy is, and there might be political issues there. But fighting zombies is always reasonable, I think. Um, Other undead is a picture of a skeleton. There's all sorts of concepts of undead within various mythologies. And then there's just weird, so things that don't fit within the rest of the categories. Although I guess technically this is Little Sister Big Brother, and I guess this is a zombie couple with a mechanoid, maybe. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, so that's a quick run through of a few things. In the rest of the series, we're going to get into some more details about various aspects of enemies and designing enemies for video games. But that's it from me for now.